Welcome back to the podcast. Before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to remind you that my upcoming workshop, How to Talk So Your Teen Will Listen, is open for registration now. Now, this workshop is going to be held on September 12th, Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and it is interactive. And in this workshop, I'm going to reveal the secret ingredient to effective communication with your teen, where they actually hear what you say. And it's not due to repeated reminders and nagging along the way. And like I said, this workshop is going to be interactive. So you can put the tools that you learn into practice right away. And you're also going to be able to ask questions live in the workshop and practice some of the tools and techniques that I'm going to be teaching you. You're also going to get a PDF workbook to download and fill in the workshop, and you can also reference it in the future as you put these tools and these strategies into practice. And communication is really the cornerstone of a long-term connected relationship with your teenager as they transition into adulthood. And it's also really at the heart of today's topic, the episode that I'm going to be sharing with you today, which is all about teen phone use. You probably saw the title and thought, that's for me. There are so many parents out there that really want guidance on this, and this episode is definitely going to help you with that. And as I mentioned, communication is a big part of what I'm going to be talking about today. So if you're either wanting to reduce your teen's access to phone usage and social media or delay it, you're going to want to come to this workshop because it is possible for you to hold firm to the boundaries and the timeline that you want to implement when it comes to phone usage without destroying your relationship with your teenager. And it all really does come down to how to say the things that you want to say, what to say, when to say it, and also how to be a good listener. And these are all things that I'm going to be talking about in this upcoming workshop. It's going to be live on Zoom. And if you can't make it live, it's not a problem. It's going to be recorded and it will be sent out to all of the registrants so you can have it and keep it and refer back to it whenever you'd like to. So head to the link in the show notes to reserve your spot, and I look forward to seeing you there. Now let's dive into today's topic. There is so much information out there about phone usage and teenagers, and I am not one to be an alarmist. I'm not someone who wants to fearmonger or share all of these stats that are going to scare you into making decisions about phones and your teen. That's never an approach I use in coaching. Because when you're parenting and you're making decisions from a place of fear, you're focusing on the things that you don't want versus the things that you do want. And this is a little subtle difference, but it really can have a profound impact on the ultimate outcome. So as you listen to this episode, I advise you to hear what I'm saying through the lens of what do I want for my child, not what do I not want. So for example, what do I want? I want my teen to develop strong interpersonal skills. I want them to create time for hobbies and passions. I want them to have motivation and direction. I want them to learn how to self-advocate. I want them to step out of their comfort zone and be happy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Versus what do I not want? I don't want my teen spending hours doom scrolling. I don't want constant distractions from conversations, from schoolwork, etc. So let's go back in the Wayback Machine, back to the introduction of the smartphone. Of course, you remember this. You remember when it started coming about, when adults started having a smartphone. And at that time, it was kind of like the Wild West, right? There were no rules. It was just this cool tech that everyone wanted, right? Like the iPod. Remember the iPod? It really transitioned you out of having the tape and a CD player and moving that around. Like, you've got this little tiny device where you can have all of these songs and all of this music. And then it was like explosion. Now you have the smartphone with this so many more capabilities and access. And back then, adults had it. And as parents, of course, we only want what's best for our teenager. So if we have this and we think it's super cool, of course I'm going to get this for my kid, right? And at the same time, it was like, I want to provide them with the latest and greatest, but it was also kind of a status symbol. If you have a phone, that means something about your financial stability, right? It means something about the access that you give your kids, right? There's my kid's the cool kid. Obviously, not in every situation, but at that time, it was like, I'm in the in crowd, I have a phone. And at that time is when you started seeing teenagers with phones in their hand all of the time. Like, it was just an extra appendage, it was just always there. Then came social media, right? It was new to everyone. It was just at the time kind of a fun way to connect. This is just fun, right? So Facebook was an adult thing. There were no kids on Facebook when it first came out. But then other social media platforms started to come into existence. There was Musical.ly, which eventually turned into TikTok. So if your kids are around my kids' age, then you know what Musical.ly is. You may not have known that that's what became TikTok, but it is. And obviously Instagram, Snapchat, and other social media platforms. So it kind of all spiraled from there. And I'm telling you things that you already know, but this is a lead up to what I'm going to be sharing. So it's almost like we began speeding down the hill of a roller coaster, not really realizing where we're going until we ended up where we are now. So obviously, we can't rewind time. We can't go back and change the way things went, but we can course correct. And the answer to this is, quote, easy for parents of younger kids. They can delay. They can make this proactive decision about how and when they're going to allow access to a smartphone. And I put easy in air quotes because I'm fully aware that this is not easy. There's peer pressure to fit in, kids feeling like they don't have what other kids have. So there's a lot of layers there too. So it's definitely not easy, but there's no need to rewind time and course correct. So that's the difference. That's definitely a challenge. But the bigger challenge, and the one that's more prevalent at this moment in time for many of you, is those parents who have already given their kid a phone. They've already had access to a smartphone and potentially social media. And they've already developed habits. They already know what it's like to have access. And you can't take that away. You can't take the phone away, but you cannot take back that experience that they already have, that awareness that they already have. And for the purposes of this episode, I'm speaking specifically about phones, about smartphones, and also kind of iPads, right? It's any device that's portable, right? That is the problem. That is the bigger issue. It's that it's portable. It's always there. It's always accessible. It's easy to hide. It's easy to have on you at all times versus other screens, which may be more stable, like, and they're in the same place all of the time, like the TV or a computer. Of course, a laptop can be portable, but it's not as small. Okay, so I'm talking mostly about phones here, and then also a little bit about iPads. So there are three problems here that come up with access to smartphones. One is exposure. There's exposure on the internet and on social media to things that they're just not developmentally prepared for. And that can impact their mental health. And it can also impact their view of the world and sense of safety. It forces them to grow up earlier, right? Another really big issue is the constant distractions. The average teenager, one study showed that the average teenager gets around 200 notifications a day. So think about the impact that that's going to have. Those notifications are pulling them away from whatever it is they're doing. It could be schoolwork. It could be talking to someone in person. It could be sleep. Anything that's embodied and happening in real life, in real time, distractions. And then also a big problem is access. Just access to things that are unsafe, inappropriate, and also without that added layer of parental guidance or adult guidance, because it's portable, it's handheld, and it can be used anywhere. So you're not necessarily there to help talk them through the things that they're seeing. So it can give them a real skewed view of the world. And also, that's perpetuated by the fact that if they're on social media, their feed is curated to their interests. They watch one video, then they get another video to kind of solidify the theory that was presented in the first video. And that's all in an effort to get them to continue participating and watching, right? I've done 2 podcasts on the book, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. So I'm not going to go too much detail about the challenges that come with integrating smartphones and social media. Definitely read that book and get more information from that. So I'm going to dive now into the guidelines of introducing a smartphone to your child. And I say child, meaning ages 0 to 18, knowing that that encompasses little kids that I don't talk about too much on this podcast, all the way through to the adolescent years or even pre-adolescent years. So as you listen to this, I wrote them down in a kind of fairy tale world, potentially best case scenario, if all things in your family line up for this to happen. I do know that every family is different. Every child is different. Every parent is different. There's different circumstances that may need some leeway on these. So I'm never a hard and fast rules. Do follow this, follow this, follow this. And that's really makes it tricky for you, I know. It can be helpful to just be like, tell me exactly what to do so that I don't have to think about it. But that's not how parenting works, because the way you approach your kid is going to vary depending on who you are and who they are. So I lay down these guidelines knowing that there are absolutely exceptions to every circumstance. So here they are. From the ages birth to 12, no handheld devices. And that includes iPads, and that includes smartphones. That also includes what I like to consider to be a dumb phone, or like a simple basic phone. And this would include too encouraging schools to be phone free. So just no access to any of those things. Letting them potentially, if they're going to have YouTube or watch TV or things like that, that can be done on your TV. It could be done on a laptop. It's easier for you to monitor. So that's for the younger kids. Now, when they hit middle school, that's when the majority of kids get their first phone. When they finish middle or elementary school and they're heading into middle school, that's when it's often introduced. And this is the guideline that I recommend based on the research that I've done and the books that I've read and the people I've talked to, is it's a great time to integrate a basic phone, but no internet. So they can make phone calls, they can still do FaceTime, and they can still text. So they're still able to communicate, but they don't have social media yet. They don't have access to the internet on their handheld device. So they're still able to text you, call you, text their friends, and be part of social groups, but not with the added layer of internet and social media. Then there's early high school. So what I said before, middle school, I'm thinking ages 12 to 14. High school would be ages 14 to 16, or 14 and 15, basically. That's when they can have their first smartphone with internet. And my recommendation is to wait on social media. So it's like a stair stepping, right? They start with the basic phone, then they get the smartphone where they have internet and some apps, but still no social media. And then later high school, 16 and beyond, is when social media is integrated. Like I said, this isn't a fairy tale world. That doesn't mean if you allow your teenager to have access to social media at 14, you failed as a parent. No. Your teenager is a unique individual, and there are going to be conversations about it. But guidelines, in an ideal world, everyone would be following these guidelines. We're in this murky middle where things are changing and we're kind of rectifying and shifting. So there are going to be a lot of kids out there who still get a full smartphone at 12 and yours doesn't. And I'm going to be talking a little bit more about how to handle that. So if you're listening and you haven't given your kid a phone yet, take this, integrate it, ask yourself, do these guidelines fit into our family's goals, into our values, and how does this align with what you want for your child and for your family? Now, if you're listening and you're like, hey, I have a 10 to 14-year-old and I've already given them a phone, what the heck am I supposed to do? What do I do now? I'm going to tell you how to handle that. And that is to have an oops conversation. And basically what that is rectifying and acknowledging that there was mistake made. So Maya Angelou, the famous quote by her is, when you know better, you do better. That's the purpose of this conversation. This conversation is where you're essentially saying, hey, I want what's best for you. And when I got you a phone, I believe that that would be what's best for you. And since then, I've learned some things that have changed my perspective. And it turns out having a full access smartphone at your age is actually not great for your development. So this approach really is just owning the role you've played in this situation. You're really modeling what it's like to take accountability for your actions and the decisions that were made at any point in time when you had the information that you had. And things can shift over time. So after you have this oops conversation, if you have a teenager, preteen, 10 to 15-year-old that has never had a phone and wants one, this approach really is for them as well. So the oops conversation is, hey, I already have given my teen a phone. Now what do I do? And then from here on out, this is for 10 to 15-year-olds who either do have a phone after the oops conversation or they don't have a phone yet and they're wanting one. Okay. So this is what you're going to do. Step one, you're going to cite evidence to support your perspective. Not just, I heard somewhere that this, and this impacts mental health, that self-harm, blah, blah, blah. Not just, I saw a video on TikTok, I listened to this podcast. You are doing your research and citing actual evidence to support your perspective. And this is going to require some work on your part. You can Google it, you can do ChatGPT, but you actually have evidence to support what your concern is, right? Whether it's a book, a study, things like that, research-based. And then you're going to be sharing your thoughts about it. Like, I don't think it would be fair for me to just take the phone from you or restrict access, but I'd like to work with you to find a solution that works for both of us. It's a win-win situation, okay? So you're setting it up. Here's the research I've done. This is the way I'm feeling about it. I want to work with you to come to a solution that works for everyone. Then you're going to share, hey, my biggest concern here is fill in the blank, whether it be social media, mental health, the number of notifications, the amount of time that's spent. You find whatever it is that your concerns are. You're sharing that. Step two, and this is the big one, is to have a conversation about it. Hear what they think. So you're presenting your side, you're presenting your research, your thoughts, your feelings, and then you're allowing space for them to do the same. In a respectful way, you're going to be listening with curiosity to their perspective, not to argue back and counterpoint, but to really actually hear their perspective. Encourage them to go do research. Encourage them to find their own studies. find their own books, because you'll probably learn from that as well. You're going to be learning together here. And then you're going to have a proposal, a solution that you would like to discuss. So, for example, I propose that you keep your phone with access, texting, FaceTime, but take a break from social media. That's a proposal. Or if your teen doesn't have a phone yet, my proposal is that you're allowed to have a smartphone when you're in high school. Until then, you can have a basic phone with all of these functions. Okay, so you're making a proposal. Start with the baseline of what you're wanting. Okay, then step 3 is you're going to negotiate and find a middle ground. So you've given them a chance to share their perspective. You've given them a proposal. You're going to share these boundaries with what you propose. And then the negotiation begins. I'd like to hear what you think about this. You're coming to the table, you as the parent are coming to the table with an idea of the baseline that you want, like the maximum. It would be amazing if we could agree upon this, but I'm willing to negotiate to this point. Like just negotiating on the price of something. This is my top price that I'm willing to take. This is what I want, and this is what I will accept. You have that in your mind. So you start with the top, and then you can work your way down to your baseline, your minimum. Okay. That way they have some wiggle room and they feel like they're actually getting something out of it, right? So there's a pro tip here, is to talk about the changes you plan to make as well. So it's not just, hey, you do XYZ. It's, hey, I'm looking at my own phone behavior and I'm willing to do these things as well. We're working together on this. So it's not just I'm the parent, you're the kid, do as I say, right? It's we're both learning together and we're doing this together. You don't have to be alone here. And it's important that you, after these 3 steps, that you continually, when you come to a decision, remind yourself of this reason and the why behind that decision. You're advocating for your child's mental health, for their quality of life, for their long-term impact and happiness, right? And the biggest challenge that I've come to find is the fear of missing out, or that they are actually missing out. So when they have access to texting and calling, they're still included in those things, but there's a lot of missing out that happens when they don't have access to social media. People may be talking about the latest trend, or they may start using lingo, and your teenager is missing out on that because they don't know. You're not taking it away as, I don't want you to ever see it. You're taking this access away so that it's not in your face all of the time. And it's hard to miss out. You know, as an adult, how hard it can be to feel like everybody knows something that you don't know, or everybody has been to something that you didn't go to. It's extra hard for adolescents when they're in a phase of life when the thing they care about the most is belonging and feeling like they fit in, like they're part of the group. It's a really uncomfortable challenge, which leads me to my next part. And that is what to do when your teenager is upset about these boundaries. Even if they agree to it, even if they sighed and said, oh, well, I guess I don't have a choice, there's going to be uncomfortable emotions. And when you're witnessing these uncomfortable emotions, you're going to validate their experience. Let them know, hey, of course you're going to feel this way. This is a really hard situation. It's really frustrating. It makes total sense that you would be upset about this. You're validating. You're acknowledging that it's hard. I know it's hard. And just continue to hold your boundary with compassion. And as you approach it, you're reminding them, hey, I've given a lot of thought to this. This is not a decision that I made in a snap judgment because I was upset or I was trying to punish you for something. You're acknowledging, hey, I know this is hard. This is hard for me too. It's hard for me to see you feel disappointed. And number 3 is to be willing to sit in the discomfort of disappointing your child, of having them be upset with you, being willing to hold space for them when they feel left out because everyone is involved in something that they're not. And just also be willing to trust that it's for their own good, right? Even if it may not feel like it in the moment. And the next thing, number 4, is find replacement activities. Things for them to do when they may normally have been spending time on the phone. Things that they actually enjoy. Number 5 is this is critical, take a look at your own phone usage. Try going off of social media for a week. Try limiting your phone use to a certain point of time or consolidating. Turn off your notifications or put your phone in do not disturb when you know everyone's home and safe. Okay. And the 6th thing, consider advocating for phone-free schools, because the more kids who have a delayed introduction to a smartphone, the less left out those kids who are delayed feel. So this is a movement more than just in my home. So that is something to consider, is getting involved. I did do a podcast with phone-free schools. I highly recommend you follow them and support them. There's also an organization called Wait Till 8th. I highly recommend checking them out and supporting them as well. They have a lot of really great tools. And remember that at the core of all of this is your determination to do what you believe is best for your child, even if that means disappointing them or witnessing the negative effects that come along with this decision. Another really good resource that I wanted to share with you is Screen Sanity. Go ahead and head to their websites. I will link that too in the show notes. They have a lot of really great tools for parents around smartphones, social media, all of the things, technology, screen time. Definitely head to their website and check it out. And remember, the decisions that you're making, the boundaries that you're setting, it's a short-term one for a long-term net positive impact, which is really better than the alternative, which is a short-term decision for a long-term net negative. So yes, it may be uncomfortable in the short term to hold firm to boundaries, but the long-term impact is a net positive versus giving in or taking away your kid's phone or not having conversations about it or introducing it earlier than you'd like to for a potential long-term net negative. Either way, it's hard. It's a hard decision. I'm going to acknowledge that. It's a very hard situation for parents, but it doesn't have to be to the detriment of your relationship with your child. And again, at the heart of this is effective communication. So if you heard these things and you're thinking, I'd really like some support with how to have these effective conversations, sign up for my workshop. Again, the link is in the show notes, and I really look forward to seeing you there live on the 12th. So thanks for tuning in, and I will see you next time.